Hey everybody, it's Brian Coley, the Movie Whisperer, and this is a place where we look at the intersection of our story with our movies. Now today I'm wrapping up a series of videos that I have been doing on why you should see the Oscar nominees for Best Picture. Not because they're the greatest movies that have ever been made, but because of the way they intersect our story of our culture and our country. And so today I'm going to be looking at two films that are cut out of the same cloth. They both were made in the 1960s. No, excuse me, they weren't made in the 1960s. They both were set in the 1960s. They both were about protest and about civil unrest. They both are looking at sort of the underbelly of our systems, and they both actually happen. So they're based on true events and true characters in the chapter of our country's history. So let's look at these two movies. Now, I want to go ahead and disclaim because I have been procrastinating this video forever because of how hard I think it is to do. The first reason I want to disclaim is actually I'm protesting. I didn't even realize it. The first reason I want to protest me making this video is because I am horrible at historical figures and characters and all kinds of things like that. It's amazing I passed history in school. The second reason is it's hard to talk about these films without seemingly being political. And so I pray that you'll give me a little bit of grace to talk about these films in relationship to our country and where we are without making it seem like I'm trying to be very political. Although, you know, protest is being political. So that's what these movies are. So anyway, let's get into these movies. And the first one is Trial of Chicago 7. So this movie is made by Aaron Sorkin. I'll play a little bit of video so you can see. It is based on these true characters who were put on trial. There was the Chicago 7. And it is these men who were in Chicago during the Democratic National Convention, in which you've probably seen, you know, old footage of this clash during the Democratic convention between these protesters and the police. And this kind of has us look at that event and see what was going on during that time, as well as the subsequent trial that happened in which these men were put on trial. And it was just like it was a crazy kind of just trying to make up and put charges on people that, that shouldn't have been. So it was an unfair trial. The judge in this is just absolutely ridiculous. You're going to watch this and be like, I cannot believe that judge existed and that this actually happened. So it is a great film. It's made by Aaron Sorkin, who is of West Wing fame. If you know West Wing, you know it's great dialogue and great characters. And so that's this movie too. And it's on Netflix. So that is Trial of Chicago 7. However, there is a character in the movie that actually is in this other movie. So because it's based in a true life story in the 60s, there is a character who is named Fred Hampton. And Fred Hampton actually is the lead in Judas and the Black Messiah. So a little bit of trailer for this movie. So this movie is Daniel Kaluuya plays Fred Hampton, Chairman Head Fred Hampton, who was head over the Illinois Black Panther Party. And this movie kind of looks at what happened that mirrors a lot of the story of Jesus and Judas. So if you know that story, you know that Judas is a disciple of Jesus. He ends up betraying Jesus and turning Jesus over to the authorities. And of course, the authorities kill Jesus. That is exactly what happens, sorry, spoiler alert, with this movie. There is an FBI informant who is in the Black Panther Party and gets close to Fred Hampton enough to actually betray him and tell all the intel that is needed to the FBI to come in and actually assassinate Fred Hampton. And when you watch this film, you will be sitting there going, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that people got away with this, that someone would literally be assassinated like this. So definitely looking at a period of time in which there was a lot of overreach from the standpoint of our systems with regard to anybody who was protesting. And then we were looking at this period of time of civil unrest. So, I mean, it doesn't take too much for you to realize the timing of these movies that was so absolutely, incredible from the standpoint of them coming out after a summer. So let's go back to Trial of Chicago 7 and talk about it. Trial of Chicago 7 comes out in September on Netflix. This is after the summer of unrest that we had and of protest during 2020. And it's just amazing that it came out because the story actually has its roots back with Sorkin in 2007. So in 2007, Sorkin is conceiving the script. He's trying to get it made all this time. He goes to Spielberg. Spielberg attaches himself, and then that kind of collapses. And then finally it gets made with him being director. And then it's somehow released right in the midst of George Floyd and what's happening with Black Lives Matter. And it's just amazing that this happened. But I want to say that it's even more amazing because you may be going, oh, it's just Hollywood and left leaning and all this kind of stuff. Well, guess what? There is a scene in the film that I watched and I was like, I cannot believe this. Because what happens is, and this happened in life. This is not just a movie. Well, the protesters are out protesting. They come back to the park where they've been kind of camping out. And when they come back, the police have taken the hill. And so the protesters decide, I'm going to say this again, the protesters decide to take the hill. Now, I can't believe that this is actually happening in a movie that then plays itself out in January with protesters, taking the hill in an insurrection. So just absolutely mind-blowing as to how this movie kind of warps your brain in the concept of what is protest, what is civil unrest, what's good, what's bad, what's the center of good, what's the center of bad in all of our country and what we're dealing with the civil unrest and the look of people who feel oppressed in our country and what that looks like. So just amazing as far as the timing of this film. But now let's go to Judas and the Black Messiah. So if you look at that film, you see a film in which same idea of protest and same idea of course, this movie is going to give us a lot better look at the feeling of what it feels like to be oppressed. So this one, while the Trial of Chicago 7 is looking at the Vietnam War and what's happening with a war outside of our country, this really looks at kind of what Fred Hampton says is like the war within and how, oppressed people feel against the systems. And of course, that has been the battle cry. Battle cry is probably the wrong use of the word, but has been the cry of activists, especially for people of color in this country over this past year, but way before that, obviously. So this movie, again, is really well timed as far as what it's saying and how it's being said. Now, I want to look at these films. So I want to take a moment and actually look at these films, not in relationship to any of that. So for me, when I look at the films of the Oscar nominees, there has been much said and much written about how these movies were timed in such a miraculous way in our country's history, as far as where we are with protesting, civil unrest, and with all the issues of our systems right now. So I think if you watch these movies and see that for that alone, cool. But I want you to watch these movies for a different reason. So I'm going to bring up the nominees for Best Picture and look at them as a whole now. So what I see in these films is small and big acts of protest. So the big acts of protest is what we were just talking about with these two films. But even a movie like Nomadland, you have a woman who's doing a small act of protest in the idea of leaving her house behind and just living in a van. And so there's a little bit of protest. That Promising Young Woman is definitely a woman who's doing an act of protest. It's a little bit bigger act of protest. There is a movie like Mank, when he writes Citizen Kane, is an act of protest. And then some of these other films are acts of protest that we kind of want the person protesting to actually kind of give over to, like with the father, to give over to his loss of his faculties. And the same way with Sound of Metal. So different movies dealing with different acts of protest. Even in Minari, there's an act of protest the father's doing by getting this farm and not doing the chicken sexing that he's expected to do. So just little acts of protest that I see in each of these films. But here's the thing that I think is so important. When we look at the Trial of Chicago 7, when we look at Judas and the Black Messiah, both of these movies are about these characters coming together into greater interdependence. So in Trial of Chicago 7, you have these different protesters. They have different styles, different ways of protesting, different belief systems, different ideals. And yet when they're put on trial, they've got to work together in the sense of their interdependence with each other in the courtroom. In the same way, in Judas and the Black Messiah, this was just really just to watch this film and see the way Fred Hampton took some courageous, bold steps to say, I'm going to go to other revolutionaries in the Chicago area, and I'm going to bring together these different revolutionaries, or these different oppressed people. And he went to actually the white supremacist in the area and decided to tell them, hey, you share a similar story with us. We have a sense of interdependence, and he forms a rainbow coalition as a part of that. So in most of these films, even in Nomadland is a great example, you have this feeling of a woman who is getting greater independence by leaving a system behind. So a lot of these films have independence against the system, but what they find is greater interdependence. So with her, she ends up finding greater interdependence with other nomads as you watch the movie. So to me, there's something in this, and I would love your comments and your thoughts on this, on the idea of where we may be heading in our protesting, of whether are we heading to greater independence from each other or greater interdependence. And what does small acts of protest look like in relationship to bigger acts of protest? And how do these look as, there's a person that we're interviewing right now in our documentary that we're doing, and she says, I think we're in a post-institution age. And I think that's really relevant. That's a question, are we looking at independence from systems, which, how do we even conceive that, How do we even look at that from a government and policing and criminal justice? Like, how could we even do that, And yet there are these elements of independence from systems that we've known, but leading to greater interdependence with each other. As it says in Judas and the Black Messiah, that idea of power to the people, that is all about the people. And so it's interesting. I think these movies, if you put America as the main character, I'd love for you to do that and tell me what you think in the comments. And as a special thing that we're doing, this is Oscar week when I'm releasing this video. And so on Sunday, I'm actually doing a live stream right before the Oscar ceremony. So it'll start about 6:30, probably run around 6:30 to 8, in which I'm going to interview different people and ask them their perspective from different streams of culture on the theme that I see coming out in this year's Oscars. So that should be on, hopefully, I think it'll be on Facebook Live. Stay tuned, YouTube Live. Check it out. We'll give you more information as we move forward. But take a listen to that, because I'd love for you to be a part of that conversation. If you want to have this conversation, we'll have Q&A, so you can be a part of this conversation of what do these themes mean and how do these movies relate to our culture and our country. So thank you guys for watching this episode. This was a hard one to get through, so thank you for helping me get through it. And we'll see you next time on The Movie Whisperer.